the star of the show, but here we go. Let me see here. Boom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey! Miss Alia Moore bringing it to Sunday Mornings with a Tiki Man. There we go. I'll tell you what, we have been having so much fun having your podcast on Mondays at 7 p.m. That's so cool.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you offering to air my podcast on your radio station.
We got Scott Nickerson in the studio with us today. He's here in the Chocolate Bar Studios hanging out with us. And I was telling him in the break, I'm like, we really could blame it on you and not blame it on Buffett. But,
Yeah, well, I've definitely done a lot of things at Parahead Club events that I'm just directly blaming on Scott Nickerson now. So,
well, there you go. Well, I'm going to hook you up with an interview with him, okay?
I'd love that, yeah.
There you go. So, all right, Blame It on Buffett podcast. All right, everybody's wanting to know, because you're always the interviewee, right? You're the one that's doing all the interviewing, but,
Usually, yes.
Different spin on it now. I get to interview you. So how did all this come about?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really know, except that my husband and I have had other podcasts in the past, and we had a really good time doing them, but we just weren't doing one at the moment, and I just needed a creative outlet, I guess. So I was like, I want to start a podcast, that's like my thing. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, what do I like enough that I could like talk about on a podcast every week? Because doing it with him, we have like a dynamic and we have a lot of things in common. So we had tons of things to talk about. Sure. But just me, like, what's the thing that I would be passionate about to like do a podcast? And I was like, obviously Jimmy Buffett is the only thing. So I just decided to start a podcast about anything related. And I decided to do kind of anything sort of remotely inspired by related to Jimmy Buffett so that I could interview trop rock musicians and nonprofits and just all the things that I wanted to do. Instead of it just, we do talk about Jimmy Buffett a lot on the podcast, but it's not only Jimmy Buffett all the time. It's, a lot of other things. So that's kind of what happened. And then my first, I think 3 episodes were in-person episodes that I recorded at house concerts in Tucson, at my friend Russ and Tamara's house. And those first, I think it was the first 3 were kind of in person, like the musicians were just coming anyway to do a house concert. So I was like, hey, do you have like an extra hour and we could chat for a little bit and I'll record it.
Yeah.
That was really nice of them. I think it was, so Kelly McGuire, obviously the inspiration for the name, and he lets me use his music, was the first one. And then I think the other 2 in-person ones were Brent Burns and Mike Nash. And that was really awesome. And then COVID sort of happened. So this all happened like before. A lot of people started doing stuff like this during COVID, but actually mine sort of started right before COVID happened. And then I sort of switched to online interviews because that was all I could do. We weren't having house concerts or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, it's amazing. We'll go back, 5 years from now, we'll go back and look at 2020 where people evolved. They grew into a different direction. You had no choice. People can sit around and whine and carry on about things, or they can say, okay, what can I do and still continue doing what I love to do? And then you discover this whole new world, right, of things that you never would have probably, you probably would have. And but I wouldn't say that we would be doing the video thing if that hadn't happened. We were kind of forced to find out how to do all of it, and we did our songwriter showcase virtually, and that kind of took us in that direction. We learned so much that we could apply to our show, and people are still trying to figure out how we're streaming on the radio and the YouTube at the same time. But it is what it is. You put your mind to it, you can do anything.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, obviously, there are a lot of bad things that came of, that COVID caused. But one of the cool things is that so many people did sort of have to pivot and start creating in a different way. And especially for musicians, I got to see so many of my musician friends that I love play music live online that I never, normally it would be like, oh, maybe they would come to a house concert in Tucson once a year or something like that. And then this last year, like in 2020, like Sunny Jim's playing like 2 shows a week every week, basically, and And so it was just, there was some really cool stuff that came out of it. And I know a lot of them are anxious to get back to tour, like real touring, but I think some of them are going to sort of continue to do some of the live shows, even amidst the touring, just because, you know, they discovered that it's an easy way to get yourself out there and connect with your audience. And so, yeah, I hope that those kinds of things continue for people that don't live in places where the musicians come as much, to be able to see them play live.
Yeah, and I think Tim Campbell is still doing his. I think he did it on Friday. And, of course, you know, have you interviewed Tim Campbell yet?
I have not.
Jesus
he seems
Christ.
like a really fun guy, though.
Let me tell you something.
On Boomer's show.
Yeah, if you are having a bad day, you just need to call Tim, all right? He's just, there's no way. If you don't like Tim Campbell, okay, you need to go to anger management classes, okay, because you got some serious problems. I mean, he's just that kind of a guy that brings the sunshine to any room he's in. And you really need to get him on your podcast. But his... you know, between him and Patty, his wife, who does all the digital effects, the green screen and all that. I mean, they really dove in and really kind of made it really cool from the get-go. Of course, like everything, we've all learned as we went. And, you know, I like to tell people you're going to screw everything up, and that's fine, because then you're going to learn what not to do, you know. So it's really cool what he's doing. But, yeah, you need to get him on your podcast.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, but I think
Tim, call me.
Yeah, Tim, you're probably listening. Reach out to her, get on the podcast, okay? So I know he was listening earlier, but anyway, I think it was really cool too that you started getting involved with their charities. So you know, what is your favorite charity as an artist or whatever, and then you were donating as well to that one and putting the emphasis on that charity. Now, how did that come about?
So that was actually a pretty recent thing. I kind of started earlier, beginning of this year, maybe end of it next year. I can't remember exactly. You know, part of doing the podcast too, and being a Buffett fan, being a parrot head. I'm also in the Back to the Island Society now, which has also a big focus on giving back. You know, I think anyone who loves Jimmy Buffett knows, and I mean, Scott Nickerson obviously was the start of the Parrothead Club, and that's like a huge part of the Parrothead Club, and I'm a Parrothead Club member, and so that was really ingrained into me. Yeah,
Jimmy Buffett says that Scott, we can blame everything on Scott.
Yeah. But anyway. So that is sort of like, I think for a lot of Parrotheads, Jimmy Buffett fans, etc., has become a big part of like what being a fan in that area means. And I was trying to bring some of that to the podcast I've like interviewed a few nonprofits, you know, trying to get some sort of the word out there about some opportunities to give back. And, but I was like, what can I do that will, you know, really, like, I'm not interviewing a nonprofit every episode. I've only done a couple actually. And I was like, what was something I can do to sort of emphasize that? And so I just came up with this idea, like, we'll just ask the guest each time, like, pick a charity, like, what's your favorite charity, or what's a charity that you think needs some extra support? And, you know, and then we talk about it a little bit on the podcast. So it kind of we're a little bit of word of mouth out to anyone listening. Not that I have a huge listener base, but thanks to Tiki Man Radio, I'm sure it's bigger now.
You know, it's growing. It's growing. I get comments all the time. People say, hey, you know, who is this girl, you know, and this and that. And, you know, and of course.
Well, I appreciate that. That's nice to hear. And yeah, so we asked we ask the guest, and, you know, we talk about it a little on the podcast, and then the podcast, which is just me, makes a donation to that charity. So every charity that we talk about, I mean, I don't have a ton of money, so it's not like $100 every time or whatever, but, you know, a little bit, whatever I can do that week. So yeah, I just thought it would be a nice way to give a little bit extra back from doing the podcast and kind of get the word out there about people and give people the chance to like really personalize that, like, what's your favorite charity, or what's the charity you really want people to know about. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. And I've been doing it for definitely several months at least now.
Well, that's really cool. I would think that whenever they tell you, you know, what is your favorite charity? What do you like to work with? And when, it puts a lot of emphasis on it, number one, but then you learn about it, right? You all of a sudden are like, well, that's really cool. I never knew that was, you know, and because I was talking about the Bahama Village Music Program in Key West, and, you know, any kid that wants to learn how to play an instrument can go there for free and learn how to play it. You can't get much more better than that. The world needs more music, and nothing brings people together like music. And so, that's just, you'll find out what is near and dear to people's hearts when you ask that question, I would think.
Yeah, and some of them are, larger, well-known, ASPCA or things like that, kind of ones that most people know about. But yeah, some are like the Bahama Music Village, or I didn't really know much about the Surfrider Foundation before, right. Or, there's a lot of ones that I have learned about because the guest has said like, hey, this is the one that's really close to my heart. And it wasn't necessarily one that I knew about before. So it's good for me personally, in addition to just trying to get the word out there for generally everybody. Yeah,
I love Surfrider. They've been a partner of ours with the Tiki Man Radio Songwriter Showcase. We've worked with them for 3 years or so in Key West, and just great people just to hang around with, But so... I would ask you who's the craziest person you interview, but we're not going to go down that road.
Well, let's see, Tiki Man.
Yeah, there's that one. That guy. But yeah, I mean, and you've interviewed people that do radio. You've interviewed people, the boat captain for Jimmy Buffett. People that are just fans, of Jimmy Buffett. I mean, as this thing, how long have you been doing this now? Over a year?
Yeah, so I started, I want to say January or February of 2020. Okay. So yeah, it's been over a year now.
Wow, that's really cool. And now with the Back to the Island Society that Dan Smith and everybody has got going over there, because they're putting together a big show at Margaritaville the same week that we're all down there for Meeting the Minds, and that's really cool as well. It's he does a podcast called Classic Buffett, for those of you that don't know. And then B-Man and Michelle B-Man and Dan Smith does one, Coastal Confessions, on 104.9 The X on Friday nights. So many
things to listen to.
So many things.
His podcast is called Stories We Could Tell.
Okay.
Gotcha. The Instagram is Classic Buffett and everything, but that's the name of the podcast. I got you. It's a different thing.
I knew that, yeah. So anyway, do you line up artists, or not artists, but do you line up interviewees? Because I know from a radio standpoint, I try to stay booked up with interviews for a while, but that doesn't always happen, especially now when artists are starting to do gigs again. It was a lot easier last year, It's like, well, hey, can you come on and do an interview? Yeah, I ain't got nothing else to do, that kind of thing. Now they're starting to get out and do gigs and stuff, So do you stay far in advance, or do you just kind of work with it as you go?
I probably shouldn't be admitting this, but definitely in the past, I have not really had any issue, just sort of couple weeks out maybe, but like mostly week to week being like, hey, like, do you want to be on the podcast? And then they're like, sure, I'm free this week, like you said. Yeah. I think, like you said, now I'm going to have to start trying to get guests a little bit further in advance, or at least lined up. I might try and start recording. I normally record the week, sometimes even the day that I put the podcast out, because I really want it to feel fresh, and like if we talk about something relevant, like if they have a show the following week or something, then that's still relevant. But I might start trying to record a few episodes if I can, and just have some banks, so that if somebody ends up having to cancel or whatever, I'm not like left in. I mean, the nice thing is, like, I do have friends like Dan Smith that you mentioned has been on several times. Like I have people that, like, if I need a guest just to come on and talk about Jimmy Buffett for an hour, like I know plenty of people that will do that. So it's not like the end of the world or anything. And I have some ideas for maybe some new types of episodes that I could just do just me without an interview. I'm not sure if anybody's going to care about that, but so yeah, I think I'm gonna try and start maybe planning out a little more, because people are getting more busy now. But historically, I haven't really had to do that. In fact, usually it would be like I would interview someone, and then they would say, "Oh, you know who you should interview?" Like you were like, "You know who you should interview is this person," and then they would refer me to that person. So I would say, of all the interviews I've had, I've personally had to like reach out and approach a person like not with no connection from someone else, like less than half the time. Because usually it's just like, oh, you should interview, like I'll email you their thing. And then, so it's been pretty easy to get guests. But I think now people are starting to get more busy. But it's funny because even during COVID, some people, like I was like, hey, Donnie Brewer, do you want to be on the podcast? And he was like, yeah, that's great. He's like, I'm kind of busy right now, though. I was like, okay, yeah, you're Donnie Brewer, so that checks out.
Yeah. Well, he is a busy guy. He's always.
He does all the things, like literally all the things. So, I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Donnie, was, his previous, before he got into all this crazy world it is in now, he was mixing the music. That's what he was doing, and that's why he's so good at it. People are like, "What? How in the hell can he just mix this song in an RV in a Walmart parking lot?" Well, yeah. That's his.
The best.
Yeah, he's magical at that. There's no doubt about it. But that's why podcasts and interviews are so important to try to, for the fan base really of a Donnie Brewer or whoever, to learn more about that individual that they may or may not know.
Yeah. Well, and for me, like when I interviewed Bob Carwin, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Donnie Brewer produced my newest album," and I was like, Donnie Brewer produces things? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing that he did.
Yeah.
And then we talked about it. I mean, part of the reason I would love to get him on the podcast is because I really want to hear more about, everyone knows that he makes great music and I've seen him play a bunch of times and, but I really want to hear more about like those behind the scenes things like producing and all of that, that I think as a sort of just a fan of music, you don't hear as much about because you hear more just, you just know more about like the front end, which is the music that you're listening to. But I feel like I personally think it's really interesting to hear more about that, sort of what happens to make that a reality. And so that's partly why, I want to talk about his music too, but I'd love to talk about sort of all the production side and all of other stuff that he does.
Well, I have a disclaimer here that if you bring up Bob Carwin's name, I have to go, "What's my name?" I have to do that, so that's part of the disclaimer of the radio station.
Of course you do.
Yeah, he was in Key West a few years, 2-3 years ago or whatever. He come in the Tiki House and, he's wearing that shirt. I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah, Bob Carwin, he's one of my favorites, and he knows that, so.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
He knows he's one of everybody's favorites.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's coming back to Key West this year. He's going to be playing at our event as well, so we're looking forward to that. So
yeah, that's awesome.
You just got through the move, right? And,
yes.
When you and I first talked about carrying your podcast on the station, I was like, you've got archive shows. And if something happens and you want to take a vacation or whatever, or you just don't want to do it this week or whatever, you have those archive shows, which I found it was different for me because then I could pick and choose, right? I could just like, oh, well, this is cool. Brent Burns, this, that, and whatever, I can just, and then I could promote it differently. But that's kind of cool when you have a podcast where you do have some archive shows.
Yeah, well, and it was important to me when you approached me, about being on the radio. I was like, oh, that's like so cool and I'm so exciting, but also like I don't want to be a person that says yes and then is like, oh, I didn't do an episode this week, or oh, I'm going to be gone for a month because I'm moving. And you know what I mean? Like I didn't want to let you down. So then when we talked about having, playing older episodes, if there were weeks where I couldn't do it, because like sometimes there might just be a week where I can't do it or a guest can't make it and then I don't have an episode or something. So, but that was really important to me because I don't know. I guess I care about. I didn't want to just agree and then be like, oh, I don't have an episode this week, So
I get it.
So I'm glad that that's been working well to play the archived episodes when I am busy moving or whatever.
Well, a lot of people will approach me and say, hey, I want to do my own show, and I'm like, now listen. If you do a live show, people will expect it, and that's a good thing because now they're following you and they want to. They're looking forward to your show. So you can't just like I don't feel good or I'm hungover from all that stuff. You've got to make it happen, and it does take a lot of personal commitment. I've been doing the Sunday show for 7.5 years.
Wow, yeah.
And it does take a lot of commitment. Everything revolves around this show throughout the week. The interviews, everything comes back to the Sunday show. And I'm very, very fortunate to have a great following around the world of people. And now they can watch us for whether they like that or not. They're seeing our ugly mugs on the TV screen, but it's an option now, so.
Yeah. I think people really like having the video option. The thing that I use to record my podcast now does do video as well. And I've been thinking about it, but like, that means that I have to upload to YouTube every week too. It means that I'm recording these episodes earlier in the day because like, for whatever reason, most people are on East Coast time that I interview. And so I just like don't know if I want to have to like be on video every time at like 10 in the morning or whatever. Like right now it's 8:18 in the morning for me. So I haven't really like made that jump yet because it's definitely an extra time. Like, it takes extra time and all that. But I don't know, in the future, that might be a thing that I would do. I think people do really like to have that option for sure. They like to see your mug on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Now that we've updated your actual profile picture on the website.
Now that it's me and not some random girl.
Yeah. People were like, well, why was the picture wrong? I'm like, well, she was in the witness protection program. Now she's out. So now we can use her real picture.
I think it was actually Dan Smith that like sent me a scrotshot and was like, is this you? And I was like, no.
No. Yeah. So we got that fixed. And,
that's good.
The live, you see, I can't do what you do. Let me back up a little bit. I can do it. I choose not to do it because I like everything live. We're live now on YouTube. We're live on the radio. I critique things too much if I try to do like a recorded show. It's in some aspects, it's a lot more work, because you're thinking about what you just said, or you got to edit this, or you got to edit that, you got to do all this stuff. So when I do live radio, it's done. Okay, whatever mistake we made or anything stupid we said, it's out there, and that's okay. I'm fine with that.
Well, let me let you in on a little secret that isn't really secret because I say it on the podcast a lot, but I do very little editing. So what you're hearing on my podcast is pretty much always exactly whatever happened. The interviews, I think I've maybe only edited 2 ever, and it was because maybe there was like a technical glitch or something where there was just like a gap of silence or something like that.
Right.
But I don't think I've ever edited out anything anyone said. I certainly don't go back and listen to the whole thing. I just sort of like tack on the intro and outro and like make sure everything's lined up, but I don't. So if people are ever listening and are like, oh, there's a horrible technical thing right in the middle, just message me and be like, hey, because I probably have no idea.
Yeah.
Because I also like, as much as I love doing the podcast, I don't want it to become too much work because, I do have a full-time job too. And as soon as it feels like too much of a burden, I won't want to do it anymore.
Right.
And for me, the most burdeny part is like editing and doing all the stuff after the recording part. So I definitely do as little work as possible.
No, it's very consuming, especially if you've got another full-time gig that you're doing. And I mean, it's a lot, and it truly does take a passion to commit to doing this, right? And that's something that's lost on some things, So it's important that people are downloading your podcast and they can donate to you as well. I mean, at some point in time or another, you have to make it worth your while because passion takes you so far. And then, usually life-changing events happen, and then that kind of interferes with what you're doing as well. So how can people listen to the podcast other than Tiki Man Radio, of course?
Well, Tiki Man Radio is the best way. No. Basically, it should be on pretty much every podcast listening app. So it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, there's like a bunch of them. I can't even remember them all right now, but basically whatever you use to listen to probably music or definitely podcasts, you can just search for Blame It on Buffett and it should be on there. You'll know which one it is. It's the big yellow, the one that looks like the CD cover of songs you know by heart or album cover.
Yeah.
So you can find it pretty much anywhere and listen to it that way. It's on my host platform is on Anchor. So I probably should know this. It's like anchor.fm, / blame. If you just go to Anchor and search for Blame It on Buffett,
it'll pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, it should come up, or the link is in the bio for all my social media stuff. So that's like my host platform. So if you go on there, you can actually leave me a voice message. Mm-hmm. So one of the things is like you're saying people are like saying to you like, oh, who's this? I actually don't get that many comments or feedback about it. So I'm always happy to hear if people are liking it, or, if you're not liking it, you can tell me that too. I don't know if I'll change the thing that you don't like, but you could tell me about it. I'm happy to listen. So you can do that through like social media or whatever, but also on Anchor, there's a voice message button. And if you click that, you can basically leave me a voicemail like you would it's just a recording of you talking. So it's kind of like a phone voicemail. And I had someone use that for the first time last week and was really excited about it. Eventually, if people actually would start using that, because I can easily edit those audio clips into the podcast. So if people started asking questions using that regularly and are okay with it, I can edit their questions in, like them asking the question, into the podcast, and then I can answer the question. So that's kind of a fun thing that I maybe would like to do eventually. But to do that, I have to have people start using that voice message option. Yeah. And then also I do have a donate button on there. I really struggled with making the decision to put that up because you don't have to have it on Anchor. It's like a thing you can select. Yeah. And I just do this for fun. And I feel kind of weird about like asking people to give me money, but also like all the creative people that make podcasts or YouTube channels or all the things that I love to watch, I give them money all the time, and I have no qualms about that. So I'm not really sure like why I feel so weird about asking for money.
It's just a thing. It's just a thing in your head.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
it's hard to do. Like for anyone listening, like you probably know if you have a creative thing, like it's hard to be like, hey, can you give me money for doing this thing that I'm just doing for free, basically. But that really helps with like upgrading. Like for anyone listening, I'm using my new mic right now. I don't know if you can see. Here it is.
Very nice.
The little beauty. So hopefully it sounds okay.
It sounds great.
This is good because this is the first time I'm really using it in an online type setting. So this was paid for partly by it's not patrons like Patreon, but it kind of is the same.
Yeah. Donation.
I don't know, engine. Yeah, like you can donate 99 cents. It's like a monthly donation, but it's like
subscription.
99 cents is like the lowest one, or $5 or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, like to really start upgrading things and spending, like if I was going to spend a lot more time on it, like putting it on YouTube and that kind of thing, that's kind of the point where I'm like, okay, I probably need to be making some kind of money for this because it's taking away from like, the other stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, I felt a little weird about it, but everyone's been really super nice about it. And I really appreciate everyone that has given money, and thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that, and it's just, like I said, it's just a mind thing. It's like, I don't really want to ask for the money or whatever, because that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for passion and all that stuff. The reality of it from a business standpoint is that, equipment wears out, microphones have to be bought, things have to be done, and your passion, becomes, it becomes a struggle, and you're like, God, I really want to continue doing this, but I can't afford to get a new laptop or this or that or whatever, so it's okay. I mean, we have a donation button on Tiki Man Radio. Every once in a while, somebody throws money in there, and it's always great when they do. This recording thing is, where they can leave you a recorded message is really cool. I mean, unless, Uncle Chester does it, and he's like, hey, you sure do sound good on the radio. You don't want that. Maybe they
old Drunkle Chester.
Yeah, Uncle Chester. Hey, this is Uncle Chester. I'd like to meet you. Yeah, you don't want that. Maybe they can.
I surprisingly have gotten very few like weirdos, like almost none. So that's been okay so far. Not a lot of weirdos. So.
Yeah, well,
weirdos continue to not mess with me.
Yeah, maybe they can leave you a message about, maybe, hey, you should interview this person, or here's a recommendation, or whatever. That's always helpful. It really is.
Yeah, and honestly, like I have the donation thing, but like I don't ever want anyone to feel like they should do that at all. Like it's really just for people who are like, oh, I'm really excited about this, and I, have an extra $5 or whatever. But like really the thing that I care about is the thing that like is makes me the happiest is, you know, just hearing from people, like getting emails or DMs on Instagram, or, you know, maybe these voice message that are like, hey, I really love this episode. Or, you know, I've gotten ones for people that are like, oh, I did this, you know, whatever this thing you talked about, like I've had this experience too. Or,
Sure.
you know, just really like that, making that connection with people. Like the part of the reason I started this podcast was, like I mentioned, kind of just wanted a creative outlet. But another big part was just to meet more people, especially younger people. That, I mean, not that I don't love my Parrothead Club people. I do.
Understand what you're saying. Yeah, everybody knows what the average age of a parrothead is. Okay, which is a unique thing to bring in young blood. Okay, because listen, we're all gonna die off. Okay, we got to bring in the next generation. Okay,
I don't want to be the only person in the Parrothead Club.
Where'd everybody go? Yeah, you don't want that.
And so yeah, it was to try and maybe meet some younger people, or at least reach some younger people. You know, because podcasting is a really common more with younger people. Like all the people I know that do podcasts are like the same age as me. You know, and
yeah.
And then also like, because I, you know, am friends with Dan, and like I'm on the board of the Back to the Island Society, I have met a lot of young people through that as well. So, yeah. So yeah, that's been a big part of it for me too, is just meeting new people. And I know that it doesn't seem like it sometimes when I'm doing interviews, but like I'm actually a really introverted person, and I kind of have a hard time meeting people. So this was a way to like force myself out of my comfort zone and like reach out to people I didn't know, talk to people I didn't know, which is actually pretty hard for me normally.
Well, I think you're doing a great job with it. And of course, we're big fans of you. You can catch her show Monday nights, the replays of the most current one, or sometimes archived one, but you can always catch it at 7 p.m. Eastern Island Time right here on Tiki Man Radio. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. And I'll send this over to you so you can do your thing with it, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really had a great time. If anyone ever cancels and you just need like a random spare guest, I'm your girl.
hey, can you jump on right now? I know it's 5 minutes and you're in bed.
Asleep. I might need a little bit of warning because I'll probably be asleep. But yeah, and this week is going to be this just because I want people to be able to hear me be interviewed a little bit. So
there we go.
That's going to be this week's episode with a little added intro and outro.
Well, you're doing a great job, and thank you so much for being on the big show today, and just continue doing what you're doing, having fun with it, and it'll all work out, okay?
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Miss Alia Moore there. Blame It on Buffett, 7 o'clock, Monday nights. Happy Sunday, everybody.